What's up, Gooder Gang? This is a special presentation of joint programming brought to you by the Autoptic 2020 Festival and the Gutter Boys podcast.
Follow Autoptic on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and visit autoptic.org to keep up with our plans for the 2021 show. That's AUTOPTIC.org. My name is Pete Faecke, and I'm representing Autoptic today. I'm a board member and cartoonist, and I'm joined today by M.S. Harkness, author of the new book, Desperate Pleasures. Desperate Pleasures is an autobiographical comic and a bold look at how we as people relate to ourselves and to each other. Set against a backdrop of drug dealing, sex work, trauma, and abuse, MS fearlessly takes us behind the curtain of a young woman's struggle to find love, acceptance, and balance in an unstable world. So, yeah, welcome.
Hi! Just spike that volume right up.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good way to start. I'm starting a little serious there so we can cut the tension here. Let's talk about how we know each other. I feel like we should just get that out of the way because I'm sure there'll be some people that don't know the background here. But we went to MCAD together.
We've kind of
grown up we've kind of grown up alongside each other as cartoonists.
We're like the Pointer Sisters. And that we go to shows and people get really confused. They don't, like, one of us isn't there. And they're like, where's the other one?
Yeah. I feel like it's happening a little less lately, but there was definitely a point where it was like, where's the other
y'all
one?
Fucking, what's going on? Like,
yeah, for real. I know.
Ren
I was sure
Stimpy.
for a few years there, people thought that we were, right.
The Ren and Stimpy fuck.
Okay, well, let's get into it then. I figured we'd just start really, really basic, assuming there's some people who don't know who you are, and start with why autobio instead of some other genre, because I was kind of there to see this develop, but I'm kind of curious if you've thought about that more since.
Yeah, it's been a thing that's developed for me over the past 5 years or so. I've talked about it a little bit before. I can do the fun of going through you and me together, figuring out how this all happened, and that we went to art school and we were studio buddies. That we would just crack jokes and talk shit and watch wrestling in our studios at our art college that we went to. And there was a distinct conversation one night. I remember. I don't know if you remember it, but like I came in art school. Just being this goofy child that didn't really know what they were doing, like most people that end up going that route, and kind of trying to figure out like what a good focus for me to be, like what I should be really honing in on, and I ended up doing like a 24-hour comic that was about the time I almost had sex at the airport, which was reviewed pretty spectacularly just among my peers, and that it was nice to see people responding to something past the sort of just like art school critique of like, okay, your form, this is following this formula, or this is working, or this isn't working. And people are just actually looking at it and laughing and like being entertained.
Yeah.
And you were kind of like, okay, well, you can be Simon Hanselman of like women's autobio if you really want, and like do this whole thing where you dress up and like are a goof. It can be like a character.
I remember having the conversation.
Yeah.
I remember having the conversation, but I forgot that was a result of that 24-hour comic day. Because you were kind of debating whether or not you wanted to pursue that, and we had like a full conversation about
I weighed the pros and cons with you just because it was like, okay, well, I came in just being like, okay, I like to draw, I've always drawn, that's like been the only thing I've been good at. Let's like get past that and figure out like what's the actual thing here that not necessarily that I'm going to build a career out of and that's the only thing I'm good at, but like what are the things people are responding to in my work at that time. So it was like first really finished full story that I did, and it worked really well. And like I feel like even if you read it now, it's like, oh yeah, like this is her work, because it's kind of follows the same just beats and kind of pacing that I've stayed with pretty consistently. And it was like, yeah, okay, you can just be really good at drawing and work for like Image or Boom or Big Two or do whatever and be like part of a team, or you can like tell these stories that are personal and maybe a little bit, I don't know, more successful with an audience, just in that, okay, you have all the control over it and like you have the power to do what you're gonna do over it. And it was really funny because there was other teachers I had that were like, absolutely not, don't do that. But like, you were very much like, I don't know, fuck it, dude, just do it. And I haven't really looked back. And it was nice figuring that out early enough on where I didn't get to like my senior year, freaking out and crying every class because there wasn't really like which isn't to say, like, you should have yourself, and if you don't, you're a failure, but it was just very relieving at that point in my life, where it's like, okay, well, this part's figured out, so, like, all the other things.
Right, you pretty much knew where you were going by the time you got to senior year, yeah. Were you started on Tinderella yet?
Yeah, well, that was just it. Like, Tinderella was, like, my senior thesis in college, so it was not finished by the time I graduated, but it was sort of like I had all the pages penciled. I had plans to kind of schlock it around in some way to a couple publishers that I like felt good about, talking to them, and I went and hung out.
Right, you went to SPX and you shopped it around, and you had the whole like proposal together, and which was not the norm. That I was like everyone who got it from me was like, oh, okay, like just a little. I know, we thought we were doing it right, but yeah, right.
Well, it's almost like this is what they tell you to do in class, but it comes off so aggressive and
weird. Well, that's like more for like Image. It's like more for like a fucking big time publisher, I feel like.
Definitely.
When they're talking in class, but they don't tell you that, we're like taking it over to Kilgore, like, listen to me.
Well, that's exactly, it was like my big boy voice that I used, and it was just, you liken it to like a bunch of like dogs playing poker with like fake money, because it's like there's no real money here, so it's like we're all just like house of cards in our own head, like this is gonna be it. Totally. Ends up with all of your dreams and your ambitions, but ultimately it's like you're using like business vernacular for like nobody here knows what they're talking about or knows what they're doing or anything. So
I know you spent a couple years in it, and you really quickly start treating everything a lot more casually.
A little bit, or at least parts of it, but
parts of it, yeah. Well, so how you talk to people that and you still gotta maintain some level of professionalism when you're meeting someone for the first time or proposing something.
Oh my god. And I still go off on people and like take my day out on accident.
Yeah.
Whoops. Send some bad emails.
So yeah. I try to be a good boy. I don't know.
We'll let everyone else get bad, so that way we'll seem okay. Like,
say that again?
We're never gonna get better. We're just gonna wait for everybody else to get real casual and not care and like realize it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. Just ease into our level here. So from kind of where you started with autobio, how has your thinking about what this means as a genre change? Because I know in the last year or so you've started looking much harder at some of this more like classic canon autobio work, more of the stuff from the 90s, and it seems like I've seen kind of a shift in the way you're thinking about it, but
maybe a little bit. I think just like my taste is developing as I kind of figure out like where I kind of fit into things or where I'm not trying to, maybe, I don't know. I always felt like I've had like a kind of discerning quality for these sorts of things, just because, I mean, so many different people do autobio. for so many different reasons. It's a very exhausted, tired genre in a lot of ways, and so I think there's always people who are trying to kind of push it into different directions, and I think really to some extent it's more interesting when you have people outside of cartooning, or outside of, I don't know, like the kind of, because what do we all think of when we think of autobio? It's just kind of like these like tome poem zine kind of, this is my heart and soul, mental illness sort of thing. So I try to just kind of like do reconnaissance work on like just what's going on as far as like what other people are making, and like kind of just study the field, so that way I just know, not necessarily like what to do or who to copy or what mistakes not to make, but I think it's just more like just being really hyper aware in that way, because I think like part of it is like you never want to come off as like delusional about anything, and you want to be really conscious about like how you're portraying your character, yourself, or how close you are to that character.
Right.
So when you make like a giant book and then people don't like it, you really do run the risk of like kneecapping yourself emotionally for a certain period of time. So I don't know, like I've always kind of had like a list of things not to do, and sort of like obstructions, just in terms of like I don't really want to be like this anti-hero character. I don't necessarily just want to like make all these comics that are about being a lady and being a woman, especially because it's just kind of like the binary is really, I mean, for lack of better words, boring, but like really, I mean, what's more interesting right now is how we can explore like how we're not just fucking connected to our genitalia.
Right, yeah. I think you've done a really, really good job with that in the new book, and really sort of, I mean, it's about you, and so by default, it's about being a woman to a large extent, but it really does step further out and try to have something more to say just about trying to navigate being alive and all of the shit that comes with.
Yeah, and that was just it. Like that's what I'm trying to do. It's just more, I think that, where like my, common ancestors in terms of just other women cartoonists have had to deal with was obviously dealing with an audience that just like couldn't comprehend the fact that they were people, and so like you have to kind of be shticky and fall into something, and I'm thankful for everything that they've done. I really do appreciate it, and I do take a lot of inspiration from it, but just making sure it's not it's just being aware of where I am, and not trying to, I don't know, not trying to just repeat the same things that that the emotionally troubled sort of men of the scene have done, to some extent too, and not just riffing on the bad boyfriend, bad girlfriend trope too. So
right. So that's kind of what you're talking about with having your list of things that you don't want to do. You're seeing specifically spaces that are already filled that we don't need more work like that.
Right. That's just it. And it's not even that I consider myself at the height of art. I'm very much like trying to make something that can be consumed widely, which is just to say like anyone can read this and it's not alienating to any one group. But yeah, I mean, just knowing it's just reading the room, right? Like people don't fucking care about this kind of story right now, and my life is my life, and we're all valid, so therefore like you can find ways to talk about yourself and talk about your experiences that aren't drowning out other people or just fucking boring and cliche. So
yeah, that idea of reading the room, I think, is really interesting, in how directly it applies to autobio work and work that's based in life. I feel like it's something that I almost don't need to worry about as much with fiction work. It's I mean, you don't want to do something that's so tone deaf or stupid, or you end up looking like an asshole, but it's not really as much of a concern, because like you're saying, I'm not you're not representing yourself. You're representing. There's a level of protection there, and there's kind of a shield there, which I think kind of transitions into this other next question that I have here, which is how you translate life onto the page. And maybe, I mean, we could talk about like nuts and bolts process stuff if you want to, but I'm really interested in how once you've put it onto the page and then out into the world, that translates back into your life. Because you did that comic on your, I think it was your Patreon feed fairly recently about kind of having some conversations with people from Desperate Pleasures that was a result of putting that book out. So it's kind of goes both ways there, right?
Yeah, it's a weird feedback loop to some extent. And the answer to this question will only become more complicated the more work I make. It's just kind of from every step of the process, I'm always kind of trying to be open to editing, like minor verbiage and how I render people. And with cartooning, it can be really difficult, which is kind of like why I like slipping in between like a more realistic and a more cartoony sort of back and forth depending on like tone and what's going on, and just kind of like waiting the situation out. Because the more iconic you get, the more you have the potential to lose, usually with a situation. But at the same time, it can be kind of used as like a saving grace for moments that are really complicated and really gray, and you're making a black and white comic, and you need to like figure out how to be really empathetic. So it's like, it's nice having so many layers of, just I'll journal and I'll just write down, okay, this is the date, this is what's going on, and I can be as open and clear with myself as I want, because it's just for fucking me, and it's not anything more than me reacting or just kind of taking account. And so I'll usually kind of know the general idea or like the thesis of like a book I'm going to work on, but then I'll go back and like reference what was actually going on in the moment, which is, usually a lot different from what you think or whatever you've processed or romanticized in your head. It's usually a lot more fraught with frustration and just like the sort of only in context of the day you're in. So figuring out what's worth portraying, what's worth lying about. I mean, I don't know when this will come out, who's read Desperate Pleasures, but one of the male characters in it, I just recently showed him all of the book. I showed him all of the originals. And we hadn't talked for a bit. He was obviously aware I was making it. We talked about just boundaries, and those are all conversations I like to have with the people that I'm, still in contact with to some extent, or, like I want to guard them in some way. And it just elicits discussions. I'm never necessarily looking for specific feelings or apologies or emotions or reactions to things, because it's not why I'm making work. I'm not doing it as some sort of fucking fear factor moment where I come in and I'm like, this is what's going on now. It's like, that's fucked up. And to some extent, I think it's good that I'm able to do this thing, because a lot of the times it does get across like how I felt about a certain situation better than I can describe, just because this is how my brain works. But I don't want to rely on that, and I'm very aware of that, because that this is like a commodifiable thing. So it can get really gross really fast depending on your intentions, and just where everyone's at emotionally at the time. So I've never had a situation where somebody's cussed me out or freaked out, and I think, my just good fucking common sense and then just my talent for being able to pull shit off. But yeah, I mean, there have been times in autobio where those things haven't been considered, those questions haven't been asked. There's been people who've gotten reputations for just being fucking assholes, and I don't necessarily want to fall into that. I mean, people will critique my work and they're going to have feelings about it, and I need to stand behind what I do. But it is interesting seeing the feedback loop that can occur, and then, you know, what you see in a lot of people that make autobio in their careers, where it's like, just keep making the same fucking mistakes over and over again and you don't learn, or you get fearful that you're gonna lose your source of creativity or something if you do the actual work, not just the fucking introspection, right? Like actually putting it all together and changing behavior, or just analyzing your trauma in a way that actually leads to not just using art to trigger yourself over and over again. So it's just a lot of knives to juggle. But I feel good about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think you've really pulled together, you know, kind of what you're describing on Desperate Pleasures here, where it's from your perspective, but I think you've done a really good job of balancing it and creating some real empathy for the characters that aren't you, you know, and it's not just this like, here's me, here's my experience, here's this, but it's, you know, you're making space for the reader to, you know, deal with some of the complexity of that situation.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't hate anyone in my books. You know, that's another thing too. It's like, I don't hold those sort of emotions for those people. And I think, like,
that helps.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I've just kind of cultivated a sense of, like, I really just feel like I am doing the best I can at all times, and I just generally think everyone else is. So it's like, if you just kind of understand that, you make it a lot easier to go through the world. You give other people the space to, you know, be sloppy and shitty, and then maybe they'll eventually come to find themselves feeling a little bit better, or at least, you know, being able to communicate with you a little bit better. And sometimes that's not how it goes, and there's people I don't portray in my comics. But yeah, I mean, even I would say I'm very conscious of, like, how I portray my father in my books, and that, like, that's a person that I really would say is the exception, in that I mean, there's like a court order for him not to talk to me. Not to say he hasn't tried, but that's something where I hold more space for myself, and then it's like, well, this is what this is, and I'm just saying that's what it is. And
well, there's a difference between that relationship and somebody who you've met and you're both kind of on this path of, you know, falling into something or having some kind of confusion to the relationship,
right.
and you're growing together.
Right.
You know, I mean, there's a different relationship there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I pulled this out the other day. You have this moment sort of in maybe the first third of the book when your sister, who for clarity in the comic is your brother, she's recently come out as trans, but for this interview we'll just say your sister. So you have this moment where she's saying, you're showing her how to, I think, squat, and she's saying it feels weird but it makes sense, and you say it'll get easier with practice. And I'm like, that's like the thesis statement for the book. That's like the whole idea, I felt like. Yeah. And
that's kind of an idea that I circle, which isn't to say, I'm like glad you picked that out, or I'm like, that's
I've got some other notes here about how you feed that into the rest of the book. You've built this like very cyclical, you know, it almost, I'm kind of laughing at you saying feedback loop earlier, because it really is this feedback loop, and it's not in an echo chambery way. I think it's a productive way, but it's that, you know, that self-reflection, because you transition from that moment into Girya's monologue about training, where he's talking about, you know, people being in these habits that are, just the way we navigate for better or for worse, and how he's seeing training as a way to help people kind of grow, and it's like this very clean transition from that conversation in the gym with your sister into there. And then that transitions into your moment with you feeling like the old man with the weed.
Right.
Yeah, you've got these great little circles built in throughout this book.
Well, the way that I developed it was very working from idea to idea. I'm excited to be working on what will be the third book in this sort of like Tinderella Desperate Pleasures bit, where it will be more linear time and like just storytelling on that way. But like thinking about like the amount of freedom that comics gives you, and especially just like the root of what all this is like trauma, which is like from a sort of like and that's just like how your brain works when you're like traumatized. So like thinking about like, okay, well, how do you actually perceive time when you're constantly being pulled out of the present, and making these associations that make sense to you, but aren't necessarily like the truth of like the situation. It's just like the thing that you keep telling yourself, or the dance that you keep doing because you need to just like survive the moment. And like a lot of like what like a lot of like just me myself personally is like digging through like easily the first like 12-15 years of my life I was just like heavily disassociated. So it's like it's like doing reconnaissance work to like go back and like go down the well and like figure out all this fucking shit with like plot points on a map. So it's nice to have comics as a medium for this, where it's like I could realistically like do a movie, I guess, of this. Like it would work in a sense of like going from scene to scene. But to be able to tell this story in the way that it like should be understood is just like being able to push back and forth from person to person or an idea or a feeling, rather than me going through and doing like this is on this date or whatever. And like I'd include dates almost arbitrarily just to be like, okay, these things are very different on the calendar.
Do you have hard dates in this one, or is it? I thought it was mostly just like late winter, summer,
here and there. Like, but that's just it. Sure. It's just like indicators, whether it's like the characters are wearing coats in this panel, and then it's the summer. Like it's me trying to figure out how I can like sneakily do it, so like you don't realize it's going on, but at the same time you're just falling into it, but then you're not getting frustrated because it makes sense on like an intuitive way, not like in a way that's like very spelled out or like very referential of the genre or whatever. So this book was developed sort of on that way, where it was like, okay, like how many times are we seeing these like ship docks that are off Lake Superior? It's like almost like every chapter there's like one panel of that. So it's like I'm developing like the Pavlovian response of like you're feeling foreboding or just distrust or frustration with these motifs. So the writing took a long time.
Yeah. Well, that is what my next question was. We just kind of got into it. I was gonna ask about your approach. Because you have this very specific approach to time in this book. That I don't know how much other work. I mean, it's not something you see very often. The way, I think, especially in comics too, the way that you've kind of fractured the timeline and had it build in on itself. I think that's one of the things that you handled very skillfully. So how was that different writing this one than when you were working on Tinderella? Because I reread that one too, and it's a much more linear. Yeah. It's almost a little more conversational in the writing.
Yeah. With every project I do, I'm usually kind of trying to treat it very specifically to what I'm doing. Like, even as I'm making like this mini now and like trying to figure out this next book, I'm trying to I'm trying to improve with everything I do just because I'm like still early enough in my career where I'm not bored by these questions that I ask myself. But it's like, with when I did Desperate Pleasures, I knew that I needed to, like, I needed my drawing to be way more consistent than Cinderella. I needed to just constantly kind of be building tension the whole time to do what I wanted to do with the ending, and have some kind of sense of, like, finality or relief or understanding. And in the first time I read it through, it seemed way more brutal than I wanted it to be, and that's usually the case of, like, the long-form books I make, where it's just like, Jesus Christ, and I'm like, I mean, I am the main character, so, like, I don't think that it's as difficult to wade through as other people do, but yeah, I mean, what was the question again?
Just, how you're approaching Desperate Pleasures.
How it's different from Cinderella. Yeah. So when I did Cinderella, I was in college and making my first book. So it's
very different time of your life.
And I didn't really have anyone. Kevin Huizinga was my teacher. And I'll say, like, as I'm getting later into my career, I don't know how much Kevin would agree with me, but, like, I definitely see, like, the similarities, and, like, I want to draw the conclusions of, like, you can kind of see.
These time loops you're building are very Kevin.
It's like, I'm just like, and I read Ganges more recently, and was just like, this is The Godfather. Like, I'm like, I don't know. And I don't know, you want to talk about how weird I am with my family, but, like, I want to draw that sort of association just because I'm just interested in, like, the sort of comics lineages that kind of go on, because we're, you know, the people that do train other people. Frank Santoro's maybe the best example, where he just harps on his index cards and his grids and things like that, but I didn't really have anyone to look up to in the sense that there was, like, this very clean-cut contemporary woman doing these specific kinds of stories about family in my vicinity. Like, I kind of look at Nina Bunjevac, I look at, like, Uli Lust, and those people aren't in America. So it's like, I can't quite ask them how the fuck they made a book, like, in the way that they can, like, really mentor me. So Cinderella was just like, I guess I'm making a book. Like, how do I make it different? Like, I didn't even really know how to make it necessarily different than reading a mini. And I do really like that about that book. Like, rereading it, I was like, this is so fucking scrappy and fucking, you're just, like, putting it all together. It's so fun, man. Yeah. Well, and it's like a series of smaller stories that all kind of fit together in one thing. Because that was what I was, like, most comfortable writing at the time. So being able to, like, get that artist grant from the state of Minnesota for Desperate Pleasures, like, kind of just wanting to be like, okay, I know what Cinderella was, I want to do X, Y, and Z with my next book. Like, I got into the writing and got in all the structuring with, like, a very deliberate, like, asking questions of every part of the process, just because I was, like, wanting to get a level of consistency that I hadn't really seen out of my work before. So I always kind of used minis as, like, practice time. But ultimately they're kind of, like, the thing that I generally enjoy the most doing. So, like, I always kind of take a couple, like, short projects between, just to kind of, like, practice with what I'm going to do next. So
yeah, that makes sense. That was something else I wanted to ask you about is finding this balance between wanting to grow as a cartoonist and trying to figure out what the next thing is, and then also being locked into a style for years on end.
Right. I'm so depressed like, sort of.
By the end of the book?
Well, no, I'm just depressed by the point of, like, I don't know. Like, I like kind of having minis to kind of be that sloppy girl at the party who's, like, falling down and breaking shit and knocking stuff over.
Yeah, you get to tell your, like, bullshit stories. Yeah,
I can tell my bullshit stories. I can, like, fit in the things that don't make sense in, like, a long book. And then it's just, like, also, if I just
they're fun too. They're goofy. They're, like,
it doesn't matter. You know, like, I mean, it does, but, like, I don't need to care that much. And I don't know, like, I think some of the most fun of drawing is when I get to do those bigger pages, sort of more like an illustrator, where I'm like trying to really problem solve like a big compositional narrative. And so and literally what I said was, like, when I read through Desperate Pleasures and I was like looking for my next book, I'm like, I need more panels, like I need more I need more like time to waste time and to like build more elegantly to things, because there's just like, you know, the things that we all nitpick about our own work, but like there's areas where I feel like the panels are too big or what have you, but I'm like, that's like the fun thing that I like. I'm like, I like it when the panels are big. So I'm really caught. But
you do have a little more of a cinematic, I think, pacing to the Desperate Pleasures book. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I don't know. There's areas in my work where I want it to be more of a comic, and I want it to work and function more like a comic, but, and I don't know, like, the pages, like, where I was drawing, like, the roller coasters and, like, the video arcade, those ones were so much fun just to develop, so the fun of, like, inking something once you've, like, reworked it 20 times in pencil and, like, seeing it function is...
Yeah.
That's the
shit. That's the moment.
Of comics.
Oh, yeah.
So...
That title spread, too, I think is maybe my favorite drawing in the book, where it's just the docs cutting across the two. It doesn't look like it was fun to draw at all. It looks like it was terrible to draw.
So I was like,
it looks so
let
good.
me just layer the fuck out of this and like not. Like, I'm just gonna play like Sharon Vonnet and just sit and grunt over my desk until it's done. And
that's labor. That page looks like labor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was like, my mom saw that too, and she's like, oh wow, this looks so good. Like, yeah, Mom. I did that shit.
Love you, honey, from the back row there.
A little bit. But yeah.
So we've maybe touched on this a little bit, but kind of the other big one that I wanted to really talk about is how you approach taking big swings in your work. Because I think you've always had these kind of things where you really just fucking go for it. And I think on Tinderella, like, first of all, just doing like 6 minis and then doing, 120 pages or whatever is kind of crazy. But then you also had those moments where you just like throw a 1-page comic in there and you have all these like extra little like sketches in there with the costumes and everything. And especially the 1-pagers felt kind of like a big swing. And I know you took those out on
yeah, I was like confused you were talking about
reprint.
I was like, what?
Yeah, you forgot those were in there? Yeah, I've got the Kilgore version, so yeah, mine is really scrappy. It's still got those pages in there.
It's like shit smears
but
all
then
over it. Sitting by the toilet.
From the monkey cage. Yeah, right. And then on the new one,
Did you think those 1 pages were a big swing?
I kind of think so. I felt like it because it's who does that? Nobody fucking does that. You just threw them in there fuck it, we'll see how it goes.
Well, that's just it. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, like, it was like, I don't know how to make a book. Like, is this what books are like? It's just like a little alien, like trying to figure it out. So, for stuff like that, I mean, that's just like not knowing what you're doing and like just being just stupidly confident about it, like I am.
Sure.
I'm just like, I'm gonna sell it. It'll be fine.
I mean, honestly, that kind of does answer the question, because I'm thinking, like, is it trusting your audience? Is it trusting yourself as you're kind of hurtling into these ideas? And it's, it's that confidence of just being like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. This is what a book is like.
Well, in my consulting group, which I would say can, like, when I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing, usually mostly just for long form work, because I've been making comics just long enough now to be like, okay, no, I have it, like, it's fine. But for like certain scenes or things that I think are a little bit more dicey, like right now I'm working on this like kind of pseudo political comic, and there's these moments in it where I'm like being the person I was at that time, but also like not being super PC or just being like blatantly unaware of things. And I'm like, okay, the way I'm putting this off is it coming off just like like does it come off as like somebody who's informed writing about like this dumb white bitch who's just running around being an idiot, or does it just seem like the author doesn't know what's going on either? So like I have you,
sure, yeah,
who reads my work. I've got like Sean Knickerbocker. Sometimes I'll hit up Kevin Huizinga and be like, hey, can you look at this? And he'll do it. But scenes and things that I'm kind of just like, I just want somebody else to read it, and I just want to watch their facial, like I want to watch their face journey while it's happening.
Right. Yeah. I know that move. Yep.
Yeah, like I do due diligence and just making sure that not necessarily like I can blame it on anyone if it flops, but like just being like, okay, these are people I trust. They're gonna tell me straight up if this thing is not working in this way. And usually I kind of have it, but it's almost like good to kind of watch you or watch somebody read it and stumble on something, and then I'm like, oh no, this has to be like a perfect fadeaway three fro. Like, yeah. Exactly.
I tend to be a little picky on the read too, because I always, in that editing phase, I'm always like, okay, what is the person who this is the first time they're picking up a comic book gonna think, you know? And I can tend to be a little picky on it sometimes. I feel
and I'm like also thinking like, I can't imagine somebody who's never read a comic picking up your work and just being what? What?
Well, so
Fantasy
I've got a couple of things
bro
that
reads Gary Panner, like see what happens.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh boy. It must have happened once or twice, right?
Oh, when I die, I want like a full hour-long footage reel of people picking up my book, and like I want to watch them just react to it and like.
It's like the security cam at the Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, I want like a candid camera in comic book shops where it's just people who have no business.
That'd be even better,
at my work,
honestly.
like freely reacting to it.
Bunch of Wednesday warriors. Yeah.
Yes, in the wild. So, but yeah, no, I mean, I feel like for the things that I am, like, just almost questioning, I usually field it through a handful of people, and that's just, like, coming up through art school, is having somebody, like, look at the start of your work, because there's been times where, like, people will hand me a finished comic and be like, what do you think? Like, tell me how I should change it, and I'm like, I don't feel comfortable telling you how you should finish, like, a finished piece. Because I'm aware of how much it fucking takes to do it. So, yeah, it's tricky. I don't know, at least for me, like, I know there's plenty of our friends even that throw out whole comics and have no problem doing it. But, if I have to ditch a page, I am the most disgruntled, like, crotchety, I can't believe I had to do this sort of attitude about it, so.
Yeah, so what I definitely have some things that I felt like you were swinging for the fences on Desperate Pleasures, but what for you felt like the big swings on that book then?
The theater scene is kind of the one that has been like
that's the big one.
the must talk about town in terms of all my friends being like, that was insane.
Yeah, it's a real mic drop. In that
yeah.
You really just
like mic drop and then like kick it into the front row like a little bit.
Yeah, right.
And
that actually kind of felt like Tinderella too, because it's one of those moments where you're kind of in a costume and it's a little bit of a sketch. And, yeah. So
I mean that was something that I had people look at because I wanted. It wasn't so much that I didn't think I could pull it off. It was just like, how do I make sure this hits exactly how I want it to hit, and then follow up with everything after it. So, and I think I did it well. I talked to a few other people about how, like, I'm such a stand-up comedy nerd. For the people that don't know, there's a scene in Desperate Pleasures where I like do a full like stand-up comedy routine about like some bullshit that I felt would be originally in my notes. I wanted to be like a fucking like ventriloquist puppet. Like I wanted to go like the Jeff Dunham route, and I'm like, this is too insane.
Oh god.
Yeah, that would have been like too acid trip, too off the wall. But I definitely have like sketchbook pages where like I have like a weird Pinocchio version of me, and it's fucking bizarre.
So ridiculous.
But,
yeah, super weird.
Yeah, no, I know. In this book,
I mean, I would kind of, I'm a weirdo, and I would kind of love to see that. I think it was probably the right decision to not draw the dummy in there.
Well, that's just it. I know I can edit, but in my book, Desperate Pleasures, coming out this fall, there's like a scene where I'm talking about very delicate things in like the sort of stand-up comedy routine, and sort of doing it under the guise of like a lot of, usually everyone that's experienced trauma has some sort of like song and dance performance routine that they have to tell other people or to tell themselves, and it's usually like a construct, and usually kind of only makes sense to them. Like, you can't really joke about your fucked up edgelord shit to other people and expect them to relate to you because it's so personal. And there's these panels where I'm sort of like anticipating like an audience reaction, as though there was, as though I'm doing it and like expecting people to writhe away with disgust.
Sure.
And it was kind of like a reaction to what feedback I got out of Tinderella. It's almost maybe like the non-reaction you get when you share super personal things, because it's not as though anyone wants to critique somebody's like traumatic lived experience. They want to talk about like the more formulaic aspects of your work, which is like, I get it, it's fine. I don't think anyone wants to be an asshole on purpose.
Right.
But it is sort of like it's that drunk oversharing girl at the party where you're like, what the fuck is she saying? Like, why is she saying this in public? Like, this is so uncomfortable. And just kind of spooling that into, kind of what autobio is, which is that, but with a spine. So,
yeah, there you go.
or what it can be when you don't think about it in the context of a story. So it's super uncomfortable. I intended it that way. And it is kind of the thing that I think most people have reacted to, when they say they've read it and were like, oh, this part, or the part that I did in Graphite, which comes like immediately after.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Those two parts of the book maybe stood out the most for people. So
yeah, those were I think the two big ones. And then also, I mean, for me, even just the way that you were playing with the timeline felt like a kind of at least a risk, I mean, you run the potential of having it misread when you're fragmenting the timeline so many times throughout the book. But hearing you talk about it earlier, it kind of sounds like that just kind of seemed like the obvious way to do it, because it's more true to the experience of trauma. So maybe that one didn't seem like as much of a gamble to you. Yeah,
and I mean, again, it's sort of like I'm not going to say how old I am, but I'm not 30 yet. I've only read so many comics, and like,
sure,
I've only made so many comics, and I will say that I've made a lot more comics than maybe some older cartoonists have, just because my output is that great. I'm just saying. But like, these are, I think to some extent I get a pass, because even if it is like controversial, like, I'm younger, and like, these are like early career moves, right? Like, I can't wait to be like old Egyptian woman looking Bob Dylan, just doing my goddamn greatest hits, like, just like phoning it the fuck in. But like, I don't know, these are the things I'm interested in doing right now, where it's like, why not just do like a fifth of the book in pencil, and then I do it and I'm like, I fucking hate this, but I committed fully.
Totally.
So like,
kind of the flip side that just occurs to me too is like, you also, just because of how long comics take, you can't afford to wait until you're the old Bob Dylan to start fucking trying something different either.
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, I think it's kind of, I'm always surprised by, like, when I dig for, like, cartoonists that are older than me and have these careers, and just to find how little they did in comics. Like, a lot of times you'll have cartoonists that'll go to do printmaking or painting, or they're in a band or whatever,
sure,
and that's fine. I don't think that they shouldn't be a cartoonist or something like that, but it's almost just like speaks to the zeitgeist right now, because it's we live in a culture that constantly wants more shit and can't comprehend the fact that you would show up to a show and not have like a full fucking new book. And it's like, I think you should like go to shows when you have new material, and like I think if you don't really produce anything after a while, it's a little bit like, what? But it's insane to think like how much like we put on the internet, or like how many minis we make, how much just drawing that we do that isn't really like, at least now, I mean, again, it's like you can't really zoom out when we're so young, but it's like I still can't believe I've like done more books or more minis than like some people that are like, you know, those like old heads. So and I'm where I am at, you know, which isn't to say I think I deserve all these accolades and things like that, but it's more just like I realize like the sort of stretch of time that you need to like spread yourself over, and it doesn't like freak me out.
Perspective,
but it is like this demand for more constantly, and like what are you doing, and this and that, and so I do generally feel like, well, if I'm not like subtly shifting what I'm doing at all times, like I'm definitely just gonna get in a rut of like making sad, traumatized person autobio comics. So
well, in the nature of cartooning too, it's almost like designed to help you get into a rut with how reproducible you have to be. You know, you have to be able to draw the same thing the same way over and over again.
Right. Well, and it's like I'm working toward this very concise sort of statement about how all my figures look. But it's also, you kind of, I don't know, you just hit a ceiling with how big your audience can be, and that how many readers you're going to have, and that it's like, well, like I should just reprint this book, but like how many fucking copies should I make? Because it's like, I feel like everyone who's going to read it has already bought it. So like, but at the same time, you remember how long it took to make, and you're like, I need this to keep making me money somehow. So it's wild. But yeah, I mean, that's the game.
It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how our perspective on that changes over time too, because we are so young, and we are, you know, I mean, there's going to be new readers coming in every handful of years, which, you know, you could potentially sell that book to, but yeah, I don't know.
I don't know, it's just, it's weird to think about. And then obviously you can't anticipate everything with the state of the world, and just the fact that like people age out of comics too, right? Where it's like they just they stop buying them, or they stop being as interested, and they move on to their other weird niche interest. So like it's hitting the stride of getting everyone's attention at the right time. So
well, yeah, I mean, I think if you keep doing what you're doing, I wouldn't imagine you having too much of a trouble holding an audience here. I think you're really finding this nice, you know, intersection of, you know, talking about something very personal and very specific, but letting that specificity be something that, you know, anyone can and should relate to. So, you know, I think you're doing good work.
Hey, man, thank you. You're doing good work too.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's working out fine. It's just, again, you go to the gym and you write, my life sucks. Hate my life. Everything sucks. And then you read it, you know, years later when you're making a book, and you're like, okay, that was we're not going to draw that day. Day's not going in.
Right. We don't need to know about that one. Yeah. Well, I think we're closing in on an hour here. I think I mostly hit what I have written down here. Did you have anything else that you wanted to talk about?
I was going to say we should do a Q&A session where you run into your living room and grab whoever's there. Make them talk to me. No.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. To anyone listening to this, I wish I could have seen you at Autoptic. this year. I would wish that we're all tabling together, and hopefully we will as soon as possible.
Hopefully next year. I'm hopeful. Yeah.
But we'll all be around if you're interested in seeing my work on a more regular basis and seeing it early, seeing sneak peeks of my third book. You should subscribe to my Patreon. I have like a kind of just like very accessible tier of $1, where you actually get to watch like me work on my Instagram, and kind of just see like what's going on in the studio each day. Other than that, please pre-order Desperate Pleasures now from Uncivilized, or just order it. I don't know when this is coming out. And order Tinderella, and order all of Uncivilized Books while you're there. So, but yeah. You're
a true pro. I didn't even have to prompt you to plug.
Just got ahead of it. But yeah, msharkness.com. You can find all my crap on there, so...
Perfect. And then the Instagram is just MS Harkness as well?
It's like m.s. There's a link to it on my website.
Perfect.
Just cool. Go to the mothership. You'll be fine. But yeah. And always good talking to Pete.
Yep.
Good brother
It's been
Pete.
good. We haven't caught up in a little while. This is a little different than just organically catching up.
This is like what we do, though. You come into my house and you just start touching my books, usually, when there's not a pandemic, and side-eyeing me as you pick up, like, a book you've probably read, like, twice before, and I'll be like...
You got a lot of shit I haven't read yet.
And I'll be, like, telling you about my dumb day, and you'll be like, what do you think of this book? Like... It's like, you are just like a young Josh Bear, like, hardcore, like, coming in with your backpack and your dirty feet, and just touching all my shit, and it's great. And I appreciate it. But yeah, no, we'll be hanging out. We'll hang out a couple times, given, we need to do it safely, but we'll find a way. I will not be a Minneapolis native.
Right.
In the upcoming future, the near future, the current present, whenever you're hearing this. So,
it should be coming out around the end of August.
I'm getting drafted to a Big Ten comic city.
Yeah, right.
So, be on the lookout for where I'm at next, because, I don't know. It'll mean something at some point.
That's the teaser. Do you want to tease the third book at all, or are we not there yet?
We can kind of talk about it a little bit. I mean, it won't be out probably till 2022 at the earliest, but, it's going off of a lot of the same themes as Desperate Pleasures, but, in, like, maybe a little bit less of a frantic way. A little bit more measured, a little bit more about being more aware of what's going on, or at least coming to the conclusion a little faster. But I am a certified, well, maybe I don't want to spoil the book, but I don't know, I'm a trainer. I work as like a personal trainer in a gym.
Anybody following you on social already knows that.
Yeah, it's not
too much of a
big
spoiler,
giveaway, I guess. But the story is me, my process of becoming a certified trainer and learning about body and mind stuff and how it all kind of adds up together.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you start hinting at that at the new one in the Desperate Pleasures here. You start drawing that parallel a little bit. So
foreshadowing. But yeah,
see that thing come together.
Stay connected, and in a couple of years it'll come out, and it'll be great. So
yeah, and we'll see everybody when we're actually able to go be in groups again. I'm sure we're all looking forward to it.
It's a shame that they're getting rid of Segways. We could have all put the weird iPad on the Segway thing and had like our robot representatives.
Put our tables up and shop around. Yeah. I like Cam's idea when he was joking about Cam Del Rosario from Gutter Boys. He was joking about like setting up like a chat roulette website that's just
that was my
sitting
idea.
At their tables.
They stole
was that your idea?
No, that was,
I thought that was Cam.
When I talked to the Gutter Boys, we were talking about how we needed chatterbait rooms. I talked about doing the porn side of it. I mean, chat roulette is just dicks. But how we should all just we should all just be masturbating and then holding one of our minis. And then people just drop tokens in. Yeah, that should be the new way that we should all just be on OnlyFans.
Oh, man. Yeah, well, if the pandemic sticks around,
maybe
naked,
slovenly,
maybe we'll get
like
there.
In a non-sexual way, just over my table sweating because it's 90 degrees in my house.
I know, I'm sweating so bad right now. I got all the windows closed and everything for recording.
Yeah, I'm sure they're your fans.
All right, well, until we can see you at the festival, make sure to pick up Desperate Pleasures from Uncivilized Books and give this thing a read.
I'll have a new mini out called Rotten as well. I'll just say that really fast.
Yeah, pick that one up too.
That'll be like a 50-page mini. So if you want something to read right before the 2020 election, go ahead and give that a swing. That'll be on my website.
Oh, yeah. So. Thematic, right. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for talking.
Bye.
Bye.